to go that fast with that much lean angle, that's basically an immediate crash. Hi, my name's Casey Stoner.
I'm Caitlin Ohashi.
My name is Neil Kamimura.
I am Vernice Flagirl Armor.
I'm Jim Kent.
I'm Matt Easton.
I'm Zeg Sung.
My name's Patrick McNamara.
Today we are going to rate Marvel scenes and judge how real they are.
10, 9, 8.
He misses the guy on a motorcycle, but he's close. It's only, what, 10 yards maybe? I definitely would have used 2 hands instead of just one because you're way more effective to control the recoil, to get a better follow through, to get a better sight alignment. It's going to increase accuracy overall.
Someone's not counting. 6.
The counting, there is some validity there in knowing how much ammo you have, right? But to count them down like that in a stress inoculation scenario like that, probably not doable. He uses a side grip, right? Something like that. So some people would call it the gangster grip, that kind of thing. You are maybe moving laterally, right-handed shooter, moving from right to left. So like this right here, but you're still looking down at the sights. Now, something that this provides is really good anatomical stability because you're very strong here anatomically. There's a time and a place for it. He wasn't using it correctly, but in order for him to use it more effectively, he should have extended fully and looked straight down rear sight, front sight. I would rate this clip a solid 2. It's not realistic, but it's a lot of fun.
Hi, I'm Matt Easton of Scholagladiatoria, and I teach people how to use things like spears. Okay, so stab in the foot there, that was really nice, and I think a lot of people might think that's silly, but funnily enough, there's an anonymous treatise from the early 16th century that repeatedly talks about stabbing the opponent in the foot and stabbing them in the crotch. So absolutely it was done. This kind of distraction tactic is in medieval treatises, so I love it. Okay, whoa. There's like spinning this thing around. So this is a thrusting weapon, but she is twirling it around like a snooker cue in a bar fight. That's not going to have much effect on people. It's not a good striking weapon. Thrust with it, it's a spear. Taking turns. So this is a favourite way for multiple people to attack a hero in a movie or a big villain, is to take turns at attacking them. Just attack them at the same time. Don't go 1, 2, 3, 4. So if they are trying to surround him, they should still have their spear points forward predominantly and form essentially a ring of points around him. Perhaps the only excuse you could give them is they're trying to capture him rather than trying to kill him. One of the things that really bugs me about spear use in Black Panther is that the spears are used more like quarterstaffs. Now, not to say you can't use a spear like a quarterstaff, you can strike with a spear, it's just not the most efficient and effective way of using a spear. If you've got a sharp point, use the sharp point. So I've got to be honest, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10.
Hey fly peeps, I am Vernice Flagirl Armor coming at you, and back in 2003 I became America's first black female combat pilot, serving 2 tours in Iraq. Guns at the front of the attack helicopters, is that realistic? Absolutely. I had a 20mm Gatling gun, 3-barrel. It rolled around and delivered lots of bullets very fast on target. So yes, 100% realistic. Only the pilots would fire that weapon. You see 2 rocket launchers left to right, then 2 missile launchers left and right. There are 26 rockets in each one of those pods. Then there are 4 missiles on the inboard. That is actually a standard payload for an attack helicopter. The rockets are called 2.75-inch rockets, so they're about this big around, right? 2.75 inches, and they're pretty long. The rockets are just like bullets. You aim, you shoot, you pull, they go wherever wind shear impacts them. The Hellfire missiles are laser guided, right? So they're guided by a laser to a particular target. A rocket, it impacts a small area. Let's say it's 20 feet, 30 feet. These rockets are basically just, as soon as they hit, they explode, and it's a point target. The missile has a lot more explosive power to it. You could shoot a tank or a building, it's gonna explode. There are heat-seeking missiles and missiles that can fly to catch a jet, per se, right? But those aren't the kind of missiles that, number one, were on this aircraft, and number two, helicopters don't normally carry them. And they don't follow humans. And I doubt his jetpack had enough heat coming off, because it probably would have burned up his legs if that were the case. There would have been no way they could just glide into going through the vortices of the helicopter. I could easily see them being blown down 50 to 100 feet just like that. The payload, that was actually realistic. The heat-seeking missiles, not so much. I'm gonna give it a 7.
Hi, my name's Casey Stoner. I'm a former MotoGP World Champion. In my career, I managed to win 2 MotoGP World Championships. Drifting on a motorcycle on road bike's definitely possible. To go that fast with that much lean angle, that's basically an immediate crash at those sort of speeds. And for me, at that angle, it's just sort of not possible. There's going to be no more grip, and the bike will go away from underneath you. There's lots of elements. Again, we're talking about on the street as well. So I was on a racetrack, you've got consistent grip levels, etc., etc. But this is the first time seeing it on a street. There's oil spills, all that. It's going to be very difficult to manage and judge those situations, so I would say that's nearly impossible. That's not a problem to do that and create a stoppie. The distance that she did it in, though, was probably unrealistic, because to do a stoppie actually makes you stop slower. If you've got the rear wheel, let's say, a foot off the ground, that's not too bad. That's at about your braking limit, because there's a certain force and angle and everything. As soon as you start going too far, then that force is carrying you over the top. For someone to stop that quick with a stoppie, it's not realistic. It's an electric bike, so they don't have clutches. Just use the throttle with an electric bike, which again would probably make the burnout that she did quite difficult as well. I would say, again, 3-4 mark.
I'm Jim Kent, known to the wider world as Grizzly Jim. I'm a traditional archer.
Stark, get a lot of stray stuff in your tail.
I'm trying to work out what bow that is. Obviously, it's got some gadgets on it. It could be a modified Hoyt Buffalo, sprayed black. He's using a finger and thumb draw, which isn't really necessarily gonna work for that kind of thing. Hawkeye, that's a bit of a mess, dude. He's got a shooting glove, which is good to see. He's got a couple of arm guards on there as well. That's what's called a biter arm guard. That's just a make of arm guard. Thin strip of plastic, and it just protects you from the sort of the string as it sort of vibrates back to where it's supposed to go. Sometimes it can just catch your arm and just give you a little sting. So you tend to have a little bit of an arm guard who just protects you. Traditional archers tend to wear like a bit more of a leather kind of bracer. You wouldn't wear 2 unless you're doing something really wrong.
Well, they can't bank with a damn.
If you can't look at it, how are you going to shoot it? The trend with these kind of dynamic things is that there's never any kind of anchor point. It's always just pull it back and let it go from whatever position you're in, which is fine, but you're not going to get that kind of level of accuracy that he gets. Like he's shooting moving targets. Now there is a famous trick shot, but you're looking in a mirror, and I've tried it, and I'm almost succeeded. He's got what, maybe 36 arrows maximum when he first starts. It's like films with guns. You get people shooting, and they never seem to have to reload. But it looks like it's fun, so I'm gonna have to give it 4. Bows don't do that. Bows are under a lot of tension. I can't think of a plausible way that would ever work. You'd have to string the bow. You'd have to put tension into the bow. That's not how bows work. It looks very cool. It's very visually stunning. To shoot something far away, you have to shoot above it. To shoot the closer something gets to your sort of your level, the kind of lower you have to get. Same with if you were sort of clay pigeon shooting, you kind of get a lead on the arrow. You're not shooting where the thing is that you're shooting at is. You're shooting at where it's going to be. An arrow does travel. It travels fast, but not as fast as a bullet. Tracking it requires a sort of more of an instinctive style. Theoretically could put ballistics in an arrow. You can certainly get arrows that have got sort of gunpowder in it and a charge that sort of causes a lot of damage. It's really hard to shoot in a helmet, but he's got like a he's overdrawing the bow as well. He's pulling it back right back to here, which is a technique that can be used. I was in a little film once where I had to try and shoot in a gas mask. And you can't get an anchor point in a gas mask. It's really difficult. Arrows do bounce. You can skip arrows off the ground. I've seen people skip arrows along water. There's a trick I used to do, and there's like a little wooden ramp, and I could shoot the arrow at the wooden ramp, and it would skip up. I'm going 4. There's a huge tennis ball on the end of an arrow. The more weight you put on the front of an arrow, the less efficient it's going to be. It's just not going to go very far.
Let me just fix this. Give me a second.
Is a little grabber or something on the end of that arrow. Again, that's going to add even more weight. It's not a case of one arrow fits all. Arrows come in spine weights, and that refers to the stiffness of the arrow. And obviously certain bows need a certain spine weight. So the higher the poundage the bow, the stiffer the arrow needs to be, and vice versa. So by adding a lot of weight to the front of the arrow, you dynamically weaken the spine of the arrow. So therefore the arrow would be out spine, and it would probably just veer off to the right and not hit the bell at all. You can shoot something called a blunt, which is a flat arrowhead, which would be for either stump shooting tin cans, that kind of thing, or small game hunting. She's moving her arm up. And when you're shooting at distance, whether it's low down or high up, you don't really move your arm. You move from the waist, so you kind of pivot your whole body, not just your arm up and down. That's something I just spotted. The shot itself, not very realistic at all. But her shooting is pretty good. We'll go 5. 5 out of 10 in the middle.
My name is Eric Terashima. I'm a retired colonel from the United States Marines. I spent 30 years of service and had 12 deployments, including 8 combat tours, and 3 of those were in Afghanistan.
Just click it. Don't change any settings. Just click it.
Vehicle ambushes were very common in Afghanistan because you're confined to roads that can handle that kind of load. And because of this kind of terrain, it's up in the mountains, everything is canalized. You must go through that road. That makes it a lot easier to ambush vehicles.
Contact left! What do we got?
Contact left means that if I'm here in the driver's seat, that means I'm receiving fire from my left-hand side. Yelling contact left and rolling out that door is remarkably stupid. You don't go on contact left. You go out the other side. Stark should have stayed in the vehicle because what usually will happen is as you're forming defenses during an ambush, the vehicle actually becomes a safe spot. That's where your food is, that's where your water is, that's where your pack is, your supplies and other things. So yeah, the vehicle's absolutely central. It does happen sometimes where you'll have a nearby exploding piece of ordnance and next to nothing happens to you, as opposed to you could just get like utterly destroyed depending on where you show up in the frag pattern is how that works, and this is just dumb luck. I think I'd give this one an 8. There is going to be a deduction for contact left, getting out left. Although people do stupid things when they're in duress, Stark should not have left the vehicle either.
Hi, my name is Neil Kamimura. I'm a bladesmith, blacksmith from Hawaii. Robert Downey Jr. has the best hammer swing. It looked like he had practiced. He was standing close to the anvil, and he's basically cold forging mild steel. So cold forging is not using heat to make it pliable like clay. Like he's actually just hitting steel cold I don't quite understand, like, for one, why he has the forge lit in the back since he's cold forging it. I don't know what he was doing because the steel had no color to it. He was probably forging it at low heat, just kind of getting it to work. But he's cooling it off because it looks cool. They love the steam.
Careful.
It looks like he's holding a cup of tea because the crucible isn't hot. I personally don't think it would create a perfect ring. It would have to be like a wax mold that you cast from both sides with sand. It wouldn't just be pouring some hot tea on it and then it makes a perfect polished electronic ready ring. I would give this a 7 only because I like Iron Man.
I'm Command Sergeant Major retired Lamont Christian.
We are going to win this war because we have the best men.
When they were standing in formation and the leader stopped and kind of looked at this guy, and he looks like a middle school kid, there was actually a guy named Flaherty. This guy was 4 feet 9 inches. And they called him the Giant Killer because of all the different exploits that he did during Vietnam. And he was smaller than Rogers was, right?
Nobody's got that flag in 17 years!
You know, the smallest guy right in the formation wound up coming up with the plan of success. In a basic training environment, you probably wouldn't have that type of situation placed on a trainee or a recruit. That's some special missions type unit stuff that's going on there where an assessment is being done, right? Because they want to know if you have a special skill set. What they were actually doing in the training would not necessarily be something that you would see in recruit training. So I'm gonna give it a 5.
Hello everyone, I'm Zach Song. I'm a professional Kung Fu Wushu martial artist. That's very realistic. Staff is the fundamental training for any kind long weapon training, including spear. You have to go through the staff training first, and then when you learn spear, it will become much easier. We do have a training is called strap. For example, my staff is here. You try to grab my staff, but when I strap it, you grab what? You grab empty, and then I can use the back to strike at you. So that is a very realistic as well. That's a realistic sweep staff. Staff is like for the range, for like say 1, 2, 3, 4, many people here. I can use the staff here like that. That's a sweep. But once done the sweep, you can sweep like I mentioned before. You have to use the energy to come back. You don't want to let the staff drag you away. You have to use the energy and then come back. That's very realistic as well. The staff guy, he got a hit. So hit flat far away. In Kung Fu, we have another training. It's called the ground techniques. You have to know how to fall. Someone trying to give you a kick. You jump in the air, you land. You have to hold your chi, which is energy. If you don't hold your energy, you land on the ground, you'll be like, the energy goes like this. You'll be like, too painful. All of the staff technique, you can do it in real life. It's no problem. 9. Give him 9.
My name is Jamie Yankovitz. I'm the creator of Survival Arts Academy. He has to be very careful in the situation. Even though they're in a public setting, this is a close quarters combat fight. This is them getting very, very close to each other and him not having a lot of time to respond to the blade. The Winter Soldier throwing the blade and catching it seems very flashy. It doesn't seem to be quite useful. It's not very realistic. More seemingly for the movie effect. And then there's a moment where the blade is actually coming at the Winter Soldier right there. So in that moment where he's trying to grab the arm underneath, we wouldn't recommend that kind of response. So the reason being is that the hand that's holding the blade is, again, with that ice pick grip, the blade is coming in right here on the face. And we would encourage students to get on this side of the blade, on the outside, or try to bring that arm another way. It really makes you think about your ability to learn these kinds of techniques. And the truth is that it really depends on the student. It depends on, the style of fighting that you're learning. We would have to give Captain America a 5 out of 10.
My name is Nicole Stott, and I am a retired NASA astronaut. That's a bad day in space. There's a combination of things that it's going to cause your body, your head, your face to freeze when it's exposed to the vacuum of space. But some things would happen before that. Of course, there's no air out there, so you would likely suffocate and die before you ever froze. Then all of a sudden you see him expanding as well. And that's absolutely going to happen. There's no pressure holding all of what makes us us in our body anymore. So we live in this environment on Earth or inside of our spacesuits where there's this pressure that helps keep us alive. And it actually keeps all of what we are in us too. So if you go out and are exposed to the vacuum of space, all of what we hold into our bodies wants to release itself. And there's a lot of water in our skin. And so that is going to want to expand.
Did that look cool?
If you were to go outside without your helmet on, it's going to be a pretty quick, transition to not being in a good condition. I think, 30 seconds is probably the tops. They might be able to resuscitate him or he might be able to come back, but I don't think he'd look quite the same way that he did before. I think, essentially, when you look at how his face bloated and the freezing and what would be the boiling of the fluids in your body, your lungs are going to be impacted. Everything about you is essentially, I think, going to be burnt in some way. I would give this scene a 5. I really think I could have gone up to 7 for realism, but I have to bring it down because of what we know about him recovering in the film after this scene.
Hi, my name is Charlie Santori. I'm the owner of Santori and Son Lock and Safe. He's taken the fingerprint off the door with tape. Could have been the cleaning lady's print that he pulled off of there. This actually broke my head a little bit. If you pull the print off with tape and you turn it over and put a ring on it and put Loctite in it, aren't you actually making it a cast of the inverse of the fingerprint?
The safe is serious.
How serious we talking, Scotty?
It's a Carbondale.
Carbondale's a made-up name, but the vault door itself, I looked through hundreds and hundreds of photos of vault doors, and I'm pretty certain that the art directors based this off of a very early Diebold vault door. This is actually a real tool. This is a strong arm mini rig that's used for putting pressure when one's drilling. So that aspect of it is definitely accurate. We'll go do a quick job. It winds up being something where you don't have your full toolkit with you. So, there's lots of times when we've been running around trying to bend wires and make tools and sort of have to come up with something that we didn't have with us. Supposedly he's freezing it and it's going to expand and crack this door apart. What they showed us was the bolt work inside of the safe and the door pan. There's a big door pan. If you poured a gallon of water in there, it would spill out the bottom of the door pan, basically. If by chance he froze it and the ice expanded, obviously water can expand, glaciers expand over time. The thing about a vault door is, in this case, there's a thin back panel that's like sheet metal essentially on the back of the door. So the idea that that's going to expand is pure fantasy. It would blow the back panel off before it blew the door off. It's nonsense, but the mini rig is real, so I'm going to give it a 3.
My name is Mestre Amen Santo. I'm from Bahia, Brazil, and I've been practicing capoeira for 50 years. great moment here. You see when he's doing a cartwheel, he's using the acrobatic as a way of attacking. You can definitely generate a cartwheel with your hands and without your hands. If you do without the hands, you get even more power because you're just throwing your body in such a force that's gonna swing very hard in the face. That slide is escape, but from that escape, typically you want to strike because what you do after the escape. That's the whole point. The nature of capoeira, you escape and you have a follow-up. For that situation, you're dodging, then I will throw a meia lua, which is a low kick, can be like anywhere from the leg here or up to the head.
No powers!
So that's one very, very typical way of attacking capoeira is with the headbutt. And they're doing the different angles like forward, sideways, backwards. But this was perfect because the only way he can actually strike back was using his headbutt. And that was a perfect example where he did the scissor. It's beautifully done because it comes from the ground, which is capoeira, I think, is the only art that it really uses the floor the way we do. Equally 50-50 standing and also use the ground. And then he went to the choking, which is more like jiu-jitsu. It's definitely the capoeira scissor allow that person to have the opportunity to do the next thing. There were certain things that I would have done differently, like the escapes. I'll give a 7.
Hi, my name is T. Nielsen. I'm president of the Norwegian Glima Federation and senior instructor at the Academy of Viking Martial Arts in Norway. He leaves himself open because he's full of bravado, but it works really well because even though he opens himself up, he knows exactly what to do to close it up again and attack anew. In this scene, Ajax cuts through a good chunk of metal with his axe. It could happen, maybe. I haven't tried. These are dangerous weapons and they can cut through quite a lot. I think this is based on a fireman's axe. I've never seen one which is completely metal. There's different rhythms in a fight and you can change rhythm in a fight. Instead of getting dragged into a readable rhythm, you can break the rhythm. And then you change the dynamic of the fight by changing the speed of one weapon against another, getting them in unison or working apart. A delayed swing changes everything. I'd give this 9 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. Thor's weapon, Stormbreaker, could be based on a Viking battle axe, but looks more like a pole axe. You have bladed end of the head and a hammer type impact tool on the opposite end on the top of a long pole. At its core, it's believable. It's just gone into fantasy territory, but it's used the same way. There's many, many strange weapons from history. Not every axe haft or handle was straight. There's lots of curves and some of them really long curves. Sometimes they used the roots of a wood, the natural curve, so that curve was strong. So the opponent's weapon is being used against them. And that's a really good thing to understand, that it's not something you just want to get out of the way of, but you can turn it on your opponent. And they show this really well here. Maybe closer to the axe head in this instance. Use force, maneuverability, balance, technique, whatever you can to try and change a disadvantage into an advantage. There's not a lot of impressive technique here, but the core basics are there, so 5 out of 10.
Hi, I'm John Spencer. I'm the chair of Urban Warfare Studies at the Modern War Institute. The drones are probably the most ubiquitous change to urban warfare that's happened in decades. As I go into Ukraine to research urban warfare right now, in the major battles, there's thousands and thousands of drones being used. It reduces some of the challenges of urban warfare. If I can put a drone in front of the soldier to see around that corner, to see over that building. The aspect of X-ray vision, we're not there yet, because we still can't see through concrete, especially not much can see through steel. It gave me a lot of feelings of real stuff that's happened, especially the use of the dump truck. It reminds me of the Beirut bombings where a dump truck was brought to the front of the base, like in that scenario, but then exploded. This is why urban warfare is so hard. You know, a dump truck could be a thread. Although that's probably unlikely that you're gonna use your Vibranium shield to throw it up in the air, but what it signifies for me is that what we call a three-block war, where when you're fighting in urban terrain, you are actually very concerned about the civilian population and protecting people at the same time as you're fighting, and there's restrictions on what you can or can't do. So, no, that's a very plausible scenario that any soldier who has values is trying to protect the civilian population while still trying to do the mission. So if the rating has to be for realism, I'll give it around a 6.
Hi everyone, I'm Caitlin Ohashi, a 4-time national team member and a former UCLA gymnast.
Oh boy.
I would say it was a little bit more like cheerleading back handsprings, which there's a very clear difference between like a cheerleader and gymnast. Cheerleaders have more bent knees, and like Spider-Man definitely had more bent knees. He was like lower to the ground when he landed. Gymnastics is very technical, so if we were to have bent knees in our back handsprings, we would get deductions. He was just trying to do the back handsprings and get out of the way, which I totally understand. It reminds me of this one girl, Danusha Francis, who used to go to UCLA, but she was about to fall out of one of her tumbling passes, and instead of like stepping or falling, she decided to do a back handspring, and it kind of looked like Spider-Man's. I've always thought about like, what would I do in a fight? Like, would I be able to throw out some gymnastics moves and like somehow hit them or dodge? So I don't know if anything would really be that helpful. Maybe being able to kick high, because I'm short, so I need all the height I can get. We'll say an 8.
Hi, my name is Octave Durham, nickname Oki. I did more than 10,000 burglaries. I robbed everything you can imagine.
My name is Arthur Brandt. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm an art detective. I'm responsible for recovering 250 million of stolen art.
Tell me about this one.
Also from Benin, 7th century, Fula tribe, I believe.
Nah. It was taken by British soldiers in Benin, but it's from Wakanda.
She's like the director of the museum.
And nobody approaches, the director doesn't approach or anyone, a guy. Art stolen from Africa is a hot item these days. Countries from Africa are demanding these pieces back from Western museums because they were stolen during the colonial era. And many of these objects do have a spiritual meaning for these countries. And in fact, I was one of the first last year who brought one of such pieces back. An emperor's crown stolen from Ethiopia, and we brought it back and we handed it over to the Prime Minister in Ethiopia.
I'm gonna take a break.
It is an inside job, you know. There is somebody in it, in a bank or in a museum, who knows about what's going to take place.
It's very easy to get somebody inside, very easy. I did these things, you know. You have to find somebody who has problems, you know, who has debt or something. I trace them where they go out. And then I bump up to him and say, hey, I'm sorry, you want something to drink? But also a strange thing, they come with their open face. He wants to be noticed.
He attracts attention.
Yes, too much. That's just a taste.
The problem with museums is that they are there for the public. It's not meant to be a fraud. So it's very hard to really prevent everybody from taking something. You cannot put every painting like the Mona Lisa behind such thick glass. I've never heard of an art theft where people were killed, you know. They shoot people here like it's war. It's not like that.
Let's say you have stolen art from a crime like this, you cannot sell it. It's too hard. People died, you cannot sell it.
A ridiculous clip.
Hi, I'm Kane Vincent Dyer.
Over a period of 2.5 years, I did approximately over 100 bank robberies.
Finally, something good.
Oh, nice. Most people, whenever you've seen someone trying to rob an ATM, they've usually have a chain around it attached to a truck and them trying to pull it out of someplace. Other thing, as you can see, it's very difficult getting into those things. I personally have never thought about robbing an ATM, but they do hold a lot of currency. So I could see why it would be tempting.
Spider-Man is fighting the Avengers in a bank on 21st Street.
Typically, if a bank has a lot of glass, once it gets dark, it's easy to see inside of those banks. All that glass, it's gonna prevent people from actually seeing in due to the glass reflection. Marvel fans, DC fans, please do not send me hate mail for rating this a 1.
My name is Anthony Martinez. I am a current active firefighter in New York. Where are you? The fires that I have been to, you're not gonna see anything. I could tell you half the time that I go to a fire, I actually close my eyes because that's how much smoke is in the room. So by touching items, you kind of get a better idea and using your imagination on how the layout is. I'm gonna get you out of here! It does have the potential to create sparks. When it comes to most of the buildings that I've come across when we've had a fire, an active fire, one of the things that we do as a firefighting team, our chauffeur usually will go in and his job is to disengage the utilities. And by doing so, at this point in that time of the fire, there shouldn't be any electricity that's on in the building. So I have witnessed one explosion. The reason that explosion happened was due to an issue with a gas line. All it takes is enough gas to fill up the area, and at that point, you can definitely have a massive explosion. I would say I have to give it a 4.
My name is Roger Cornell. I'm an explosives engineer. He takes essentially his claws and he strikes them against the rocks to create a spark to initiate the flame. If I'm remembering correctly, it's adamantium, what his claws are made of, which is completely fictitious. I have no idea what the properties of that material would be, but there are a lot of metals out there that don't spark. There are other ways to initiate fuel. That seems like a pretty silly one that probably wouldn't work out. You know, that's a very rocky surface. Even if you got it to start burning, it would probably die out before it ever reached the helicopter. I would never expect this to explode. You have a helicopter that's crashed and that's already leaking fuel. So when the fuel tank ruptures, there's no pressure vessel that can heat up, that can allow pressure to build, where you'd actually get some sort of an explosion. But if you had an explosion on that scale, you'd have pieces of that helicopter being thrown in every direction, not to mention the pressure wave that's produced. So he would definitely hit the ground at some point. He regenerates, so I guess you could walk away from this and he'd be fine.
Hi, I'm Jim Kekelius. I'm a physics professor at the University of Minnesota. That's a scene from the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and as they're making their jailbreak, Rocket turns off the artificial gravity in the space station so that everyone else floats and is unable to get their bearings, and they make their escape.
I told you I had a plan.
Say you're in an elevator, and in the worst case scenario, the cables break and you start free falling. You're no longer feeling the effects of gravity. It's as if you're weightless. You could start doing magic tricks to the other people in the elevator. Say, hey, look at this pipe, and let go of the pipe and it would just float there because it's falling, you're falling all at the same rate. But if you're already standing on the floor, you'd stay standing on the floor. However, anyone who was walking, at the moment they were walking, they were pressing their feet down on the ground and then lifting their feet up. And at that moment, if the gravity was turned off, they would have launched themselves up. And without gravity to slow their ascent, they would keep rising. in that way. So the people who were stationary and started to float up, not so much. Anyone who was walking would indeed start to flow up. I'm not quite sure how the artificial gravity is being generated in the space station, and the whole notion of artificial gravity that can be turned on and off at will in generalized locations in the space station, that's a bit too far. Talking raccoons, that part's okay.
My undying fidelity.
So Thanos has just acquired the Space Infinity Stone. And as soon as he has this, he's able to stop Loki's dagger thrust in midair.
Undying. You should choose your words more carefully.
Well, there's actually some real physics behind this. Back in the beginning of the 20th century, Emmy Noether was able to show a deep, intimate connection between space and momentum. Controlling the Space Stone not only allows you to teleport, but apparently also gives you command over momentum. Loki's dagger thrust is arrested, and all of the momentum is stopped. If you look closely around Loki's arm, you see a little blue glow that's coming from the Space Stone that's arresting the momentum of his thrust. It's worth noting that in Captain America: The First Avenger, the Space Stone, which was embedded in the Tesseract at the time, is the only Infinity Stone that was actually weaponized by Hydra and used to create force beams, thereby showing that there is indeed a connection between space and momentum. The first Iron Man movie, 2008, the one that started the whole Marvel universe. I love it. Tony Stark, the superhero as engineer, and the engineer as superhero. When he built his first suit in a cave out of scraps, it was made of iron and was very heavy, about 150 pounds, just counting the iron, not counting the weaponry. Then he developed the Mark II, which was titanium. Titanium is lighter than iron and strong. And then in order to combat the icing problem, he used a gold titanium alloy.
Connect to the Cisco, have it reconfigure the shell metals, use the gold titanium alloy from the Seraphim tactical satellite. That should ensure fuselage integrity while maintaining power to weight ratio. Got it?
Now, there are gold titanium alloys. They tend to be very brittle. They're used in dental applications more than anything else. So unless he's fighting, crime boss gingivitis, I don't think that he's really would want to use a gold titanium alloy. So much of the technology, except for the arc reactor, are things that we actually have right now. We have exoskeletons, we have plating, we even have jet boots. The one thing we don't have is a power supply. He has an arc reactor that's about the size of a hockey puck and puts out the power of 3 nuclear power plants. If we knew how to do that, we wouldn't need superheroes, because otherwise you'd have an Iron Man suit, but you'd have to drag a long extension cord behind you in order to have enough power for the suit. One thing that's realistic in this is that we never see him when he engages his boots or shoots a repulsor ray. We never see him press a button or give a voice command. He thinks it and it happens. That's because he has a cybernetic helmet that picks up his thought waves and sends the information to the suit. This is real. Scientists and engineers at the University of Minnesota and at other universities and institutions around the world are developing cybernetic helmets that pick up the very weak radio waves that are generated when we think, amplifying them, sending them via Bluetooth to another device. They're trying to develop prosthetics and treat paralysis, but if you had asked me as a kid when I was reading Iron Man comics, which part in the 21st century would be the closest to reality, the last thing I would have said was the cybernetic helmet.
Why don't you pick on someone your own size?
Ant-Man shrinking down to the size of an ant, even much smaller. When Ant-Man shrinks, he's also able to control his mass. And he shrinks at constant density, so he's very lightweight. When he rides on an ant, for example, he doesn't smush the ant. But when he wants to punch Yellow Jacket, he's able to increase his mass, so there's more force, more momentum behind his punch. How does he do it? in the comics and in the movie via Pym particles that were discovered by Hank Pym. If they had just given a little bit of lip service to how one changes the size of atoms. They say that they're changing the spacing between the atoms or the space in the atoms. No. The size of an atom is determined via quantum mechanics to be the ratio of several fundamental constants: charge of an electron, mass of an electron, Planck's constant. If, via the Pym field, to adjust, say, the magnitude of Planck's constant, make it 10 times smaller, then the atoms would become 100 times smaller, and the size of an object would shrink uniformly. If you make it 10 times bigger, the size of the atoms would be 100 times bigger, you could become Giant Man.
Spider-Man! Oh my God, this is it! Tell everyone to hang on!
Oh yeah, I see that look in class a lot. So here, Peter Parker Spider-Man needs to stop a runaway elevated train. He shoots out multiple web lines. They stretch a great deal, but they don't break, and he's able to stop the train just in the nick of time. How strong does the webbing have to be for this to work? We can look up the mass of a train. We can estimate its initial velocity by seeing how long it takes to pass city blocks. We can look at the distance over which the webbing stretches. We can estimate its diameter. We can count the number of web lines. And we come up with a tensile strength for the webbing that has to be about 1,000 megapascals, which is equivalent to 145,000 pounds per square inch. But real spider silk has a tensile strength of 1,200 megapascals. If Spider-Man's webbing is anywhere as strong as real spider silk, then this indeed could happen. He's shooting it out of his wrists, which is not what a real spider would do, but we'll just leave that aside. Doctor Strange is a deviation from all the other Marvel movies insofar as everything else in the Marvel Cinematic Universe up till then had some sort of hand-wavy super science type explanation. But here they're going for just full-on magic.
This doesn't make any sense.
Not everything does. Not everything has to.
The notion that there are multiple dimensions is an idea that has been taken seriously by at least some physicists.
What if I told you the reality you know is one of many?
Quantum mechanics is the branch of physics that describes the properties of atoms and how they interact with light. One aspect of quantum mechanics that many scientists find troubling is that it only deals with probabilities. So you can calculate the probability of a measurement giving the electron at a certain location in space and time, but not exactly where that electron will be. One alternative explanation is that there are actually an infinite number of parallel universes. You find the electron at one location, but in other universes, it might be at some different location. So presumably, maybe Doctor Strange is visiting some of these parallel Earths that have undergone significant quantum deviations from our own. As far as the science there, even if they're in a parallel Earth, the fact that their antagonists are able to affect the orientation of gravity locally, I'm sorry, that's just magic. But he's the master of the mystic arts, so I'll give him a break.
You want me to put the hammer down?
Thor puts the hammer down on Captain America's shield. In the movies, the shield is made of pure vibranium, where in the comics, it's an alloy of steel and vibranium. That's actually more realistic. You want steel to provide strength and rigidity so that when Captain America throws his mighty shield, it will ricochet. But you want the vibranium because it absorbs all vibrations, making it the perfect shock absorber, as it's absorbing Thor's hammer blow in this scene.
It's completely vibration absorbent.
Energy can't be destroyed. It can only be converted to another form. The energy of the hammer strike is converted into sound waves in the hammer. And if the vibranium absorbs it, what form does it take? What we see from the clip. It's converted into blue light, ultraviolet light. This enormous flash of light that's given off is showing that the vibranium is actually a perfect sonoluminescent material. Sono meaning sound, luminescent meaning light. You send sound waves in, and you get light out. This is a real phenomenon in physics. The only real difference is that vibranium unfortunately doesn't exist.
You're linked to Janet. It's quantum entanglement between the quantum states of Posner molecules in your brains.
This is a classic example of quantum mumbo jumbo. There are some real words and real concepts that were used there, but they're used in a context or in connection with other phrases that I just cannot follow. But quantum entanglement is a real thing. If you bring two objects so close together that their quantum wave functions overlap, then they can only be described as a single two-object quantum wave function. And if I bring them very far apart and I don't disentangle them, then they remain connected. So something that's done on this end shows up in the other end, even though they could be on opposite ends of the Earth or opposite ends of the solar system. They would still be communicating to each other because they're still described by one single wave function. Scientists are using this property of entangled quantum states to try to see if they can develop superior computers. They're trying to make the context for a character in the movie Ghost who is quantum mechanically tunneling through solid objects. A real phenomena, but the way they're doing it just doesn't really make sense. A little bit too much quantum woo. So I'd say less woo, more quantum.
I'm not going to make it.
Keep going.
The Black Panther and his sister, scientific genius Shuri, she's using a holographically generated car in Wakanda to steer a car the Black Panther has commandeered in South Korea.
Which side of the road is it?
For God's sake, just drive.
Okay, calm down.
What makes Wakanda special is that it's near inexhaustible supply of vibranium, an extraterrestrial mineral that has the ability to absorb all vibrations. The hard light hologram always used to bother me. Holograms are interference patterns created with light. The hologram itself is not an actual object, it is an image. But I thought about it some more. Using sound, you can create regions that have a pressure and exert a force as if they were a solid object. And presumably, if you overlay that with an optical hologram, you would have something that feels solid but is generated via light. Presumably, using their command of vibranium, Shuri is able to do this and overlay it with an optical hologram, which has no solidity, but still produces a visual image for her to interact with. I don't know if I could create an interference sound pattern overlaid with a hologram to create a hard light object, but surely someone can.
Sure.
Surprising absolutely no one, here we see Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, showing up in Avengers Endgame, obviously responding to the SOS call sent out by Nick Fury at the end of Avengers Infinity War. We last saw her in the mid-1990s at the end of her own movie, Captain Marvel, where she took off into outer space to try to find the Skrulls' homeworld. She comes back to Earth 25 years later, doesn't appear to be any older. Einstein's special theory of relativity says that all observers, whether stationary or moving, have to agree on the value of the speed of light. For that to be the case, they will disagree about distances and disagree about times. There's an effect called time dilation that if someone is moving very close to the speed of light, to a stationary observer, time will appear to have been moving slower. Say she spends 6 months traveling close to, but not at the speed of light, then 6 months traveling at this velocity would correspond to 24 years passing on Earth. We don't know what's going to happen in Captain Marvel 2, but if any of it involves traveling near the speed of light, then the time dilation effect could easily account for the fact that she doesn't appear to have aged significantly from the last movie.
My name is Sasha Lucioni, and I'm an AI researcher at Hugging Face, a global startup that works on responsible AI.
Is she there?
At your service, sir.
Gauge heads-up display.
Check.
Chatbots right now are more like, Siri can set an alarm for you, or Alexa can add, chocolate milk to your grocery list, but we are far, far from Jarvis. Sadly, that would be really great though. I think the real challenge of that would be to take all these different sources of information, so Tony Stark's history and what he likes and his habits, and if you start integrating different sources of information, it's really hard to essentially weave them together, because currently AI is not very good at taking different sources of input and stitching it together and responding to it in real time.
Sir, there are still terabytes of calculations needed before an actual flight is a
Jarvis, sometimes you gotta run before you can walk.
So the way it usually works now for AI in aviation, it's really responding to, for example, GPS coordinates, altitude, actually wind speeds and wind directions as well. You would have to pre-train the system, so just going out for a test flight like Tony Stark did would be pretty dangerous, because if there's no data about that location, if there's no topology data of the city of Los Angeles, you can be in big trouble. Autopilots in planes use a lot of artificial intelligence, especially when they're cruising, especially when things are pretty stable.
There is a potentially fatal buildup of ice occurring.
If there's really a life or death decision, like is the case here, ice buildup, we want to make sure that we're listening to the AI instead of just YOLOing our way through the sky. Most of the AI that's used on planes is human in the loop. Human in the loop is a type of AI system where humans are really involved in the decision making, and it essentially makes sure that no particularly damaging or particularly high stakes decisions get made without a human getting involved in the process somehow. It's really important to have a human pilot call the shots even when the sensors are freezing up, and that's why we always have two pilots in planes, because AI isn't really good with new situations it's never been trained with, so you always want to have someone to pick up, in case of a mistake. I would give it a 4 because the elements are there, so we definitely have AI assistants, we definitely have AI autopilot, but it's not at the level of Iron Man. Having so many drones in one spot and being able to make them all function somehow together for me is really hard to believe, because currently drones usually work either by themselves, kind of in high in the sky in terms of warfare, or sometimes they will have synchronized drones, but more like the tiny little ones for the firework type displays. But actually having military drones in such close quarters and not shooting at each other, I think it's a really big technical challenge.
Stand by for retinol and biometric scan. Shall I execute all cancellation protocols?
Do it! Execute them all!
Confirmed.
Tony Stark's glasses allow anyone using them to control the AI systems that he created. That includes the defense satellites and the combat drones that you see in this clip. You could use smart glasses to control drones if you were talking to your glasses, with all the noise that it's in the clip. You have to be really sure that, that's what he said and that's the instruction that he gave, because there's always some amount of interference. I feel like tech companies have been trying to make smart glasses a thing for the last decade, but currently they're so clunky and not particularly user-friendly. So, once again, if you wanted someone to be able to control satellites or drones with them, they would need to be hooked up to your brain, and we do not have that level of connection between neural links and smart wearables right now. We're not there yet. I would rate this clip a 2 for realism.
My name is Greg Spriggs. I work at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. If you took a nuclear weapon and you detonated it out in true outer space, not in the upper atmosphere, but in outer space, what happens is the bomb would vaporize because of all the energy that would be deposited in the weapon itself. There is no shockwave in outer space. Shockwave can only occur when you have this disturbance moving through some other medium. And they kind of show this ball of gas, which that would not be associated with the nuclear detonation itself. Too much mass involved with it. And also it would cool almost immediately. And you're in outer space, you get these radiative cooling, and you would see a bright flash, and it would last for maybe 10 to 20 microseconds. and then it would go completely black. Now, the fact that they put this inside of some sort of a structure might have been their fuel that was actually exploding there, and not the nuclear detonation. You know, if this explosion was propagating down the length of this spaceship, then okay, it lasts longer. But if it were an instantaneous kind of thing, it would cool almost immediately. It was my least favorite. I'd give it a 1.
関信秀と申します。浅山一電流標法第22世宗家をお預かりしております。
With mutation and God's mistake that ruined this house.
なんか俺切ればよかったんじゃないと思うけどね。なんかこうチンチンっていう風になったので、チンパッとこっちで切るとかね、そういう風にすればよかったかなっていう風にも見えますけどね。ここから閉じた刀を開く動作で、開いた瞬間に小太刀は当たらず大刀だけ当たるんですね。で当たった瞬間に小太刀の向きを変えるとこう入るという、はい、これをこうなります。はい、これが攻撃と防御が一体となる2刀の理でございます。閉じた左右の刀を開くことで、払うと切るが同時になります。で、欠点は片手であるということと、やっぱりね、慣れていて頭の回転が速くないとやっぱりね一刀の人の方が有利かもしれませんね。はい、要するにこっちの刀で払う、相手の切ってきたものを払う、同時に切るっていうことが可能になってくるけども、これの取り回しが下手だと一本の人の方が強くなっちゃうっていうで、まして片手ですのでね、はい、なかなかに容易じゃないっていうところですね。はい、あれは正しいと思いますよ。はい、受けて押し込んできたっていうのは正しいと思います。あるいはあのままの状態で蹴っ飛ばすとかね、はい、そういうことも出てきますね。はい、一刀でねこうしてればまだ別なんですが、こういう状態でこうされてるんで結構これ負けますね。はい、こっちに負けます。はい、リアリティは7。おそらくあんなうまいヤクザはいないと思いますね。はい、非常に安定した素晴らしい技術だと思います。ちょっとね間を取ったりこうわざとね見せつけるシーンというのも当然、あったわけですけども、非常に素晴らしいと思います。受ける角度とか胴を抜いた瞬間とかですね、はい、非常に距離感も非常にいいですし、普通に剣術に見えますね。はい、片手で戦うメリット利点ということですが、まあ空いてる手でね相手を殴ったりできるということもあるんですが、それは別に諸手で持ってたってできることなのでね、急に片手になればいいだけの話なので、そこじゃなくてその跳ね返りを利用して切り返すとか、そういうことにも向いてきますし、あと間合いを取ってですね、諸手の人が微妙に届かない間合いから自分の太刀はね伸びるんですよ。そういう利点があるんです。はい、斬撃力とは何かというと、要するに切る強さと、力強さという意味にかけるという意味ですね。斬撃力にかけるというのはそういう意味です。こう構えてて刀をこう引いてるわけですからね。でそれで突っ込んでって元に戻すという行為になるので、間合いの遠近を相手が測りづらくはなっていると、そういうことだと思います。リアリティは7。懸念がないですね。普通に、剣術的なものを生かせてて、オーソドックスでありながらなおかつ見応えがあってですね、非常にいいと思います。はい、そういうことですね。はい、 三角が上手っていう師匠のくらいです。
私は新藤達也です。現在牧師をしておりますが、過去に15年間ヤクザをしております。ヤクザはね、お風呂大好きなの。銭湯大好き。私も大好き。刑務所の中ではほら15分しか入れないでしょ。だからね、お風呂ゆっくり入りたいの。お風呂屋さんにも見えない。下着はつけませんから、絶対に。ありえ刀を浴室に持っていくことがありえません。すぐダメになってしまいます。もちろん日本の法律っていうのは刃渡りといって刃が7センチ、決まってるんです。刃の長さは決まってて、これ以上の刃を持ってたらもうすぐ逮捕されるんです。だからむやみに持って歩けないですよ。これはもうむちゃくちゃな映画ですよ。この映画のリアリティ10段階評価-5